Okay, so it looks like we're live on Facebook, and this is Conscious Conversation and Connection. And I'm just going to double check here to make sure we're going, but I believe we are.
Lost
Okay.
us. There we go. I'm trying to make sure that I get a notification so we see if we have viewers.
Okay. So we're just kind of getting ready here a little bit, but make sure we have everything in place. But tonight we're going to talk a little bit about how we each sort of prepare for our sessions that we do, whether we're doing just channeled sessions or healing sessions or whatever. So we're going to talk a little bit about how we prepare for that. Okay, so I can start, I guess, a little bit on that. I won't say always, but I tend to prepare my space whenever I'm getting ready for a session by sort of clearing the energy out of the space to make sure it's there's no lower vibrations and things, entities or things hanging about. So I tend to do that through, I usually burn some sage and I kind of set my intention that the space is clear, that there's no, any lower vibrations, anything that's out of alignment with love or out of alignment with source energy needs to leave, and that only love lives here. And then sometimes if I feel like I need a little extra, I might do some sort of sound, like a rattle to break up energy, or a drum if I feel like it needs more than that. And then I sort of just prepare myself by going into a little bit of meditation beforehand and calling in my higher self as well as the higher self of the person I'm going to be working with. And then also calling in their guides, their ascended masters, teachers, guides, angels, and whatnot. And then as well as my own, working in concert together to make sure we get the clearest and most accurate, highest and best information for the individual that's going to be most beneficial to them at this point in their incarnation. And then that's just kind of how I set it up. And sometimes I'll get some information coming in beforehand or images, but not always. And I never know how the session is going to go. It may be information coming through. There may be some healing energy, some transmissions, that sort of thing that come through. So I just kind of go with the flow at that point and see what happens. How about you guys?
It kind of sounds familiar. Yeah, I do the same thing. I take my little, I don't use the whole stage because we have like the sprinkler system and fire smoke detector. So that'll just be going off. So I use these little stage sticks with Palo Santo, which I love. So I'll go through the rooms, sometimes if I am called to it, I'll do a heavy smudge. If I don't, it's just kind of like, okay, I'm creating the space, this portal, and I'm inviting, so and so spirit guides and their angels and their higher self. And sometimes I'll clear their energy, and I can get a lot of information once I start clearing energy. I'm like, oh, there's something in their childhood that we need to talk about and see if they want to discuss that. And yeah, so I'll spend like a good hour clearing my own energy and then clearing theirs. And then sometimes I'll start writing stuff down. I'm like, oh, I got to remember this. What else do I do? So I'm trying to get away from that. Something that it's good to do that, especially if I'm helping clear their energy, but I'm trying to just jump into a session. Once I clear the energy, I'm like, okay, let's talk. Let me start picking up energy this way, because sometimes I don't have enough time in the day to spend all that, but that is a typical session, so yeah, it sounds a lot what I do. How about you, Anya?
So I do spend quite a bit of time in the morning preparing myself. That's something I do every morning because I do a lot of work at night. And so bringing myself into balance in the morning and clearing myself, scanning my system, checking everything to make sure I'm in alignment and that there's nothing in my field other than Christ consciousness and my guides and my angelic realms. And so I work on myself first in the morning. And I start when I wake up. I do a little bit here and there when I'm getting ready. I do a little bit in the shower. I so it's always kind of cool. I end up doing some toning in the shower, which is always fun. And then as I'm preparing the room, if I have someone in person, I'm preparing the room and preparing the bed. I clear out the space here in this space and in my home. And I already have a lot of things in place energetically. So sometimes I'll smudge. I use small pieces of loose sage. And but every time I do some incense to bring in some clarity into the space. And then before someone's coming in, again, I prepare the room, prepare the space, and my home is set up already to not allow anything that isn't benevolent into the space. So oftentimes, and I do actually have something at the front door that assists with clearing anything out before someone enters. And it's a process. It's something that I keep up with, that I make sure that I'm diligent with. And I do hear often that as soon as somebody walks through the door, they feel the difference. And they feel like it's very grounding and clear. I hear that all the time, that it feels clear and spacious, and that the energy is different than what they're used to. So, so I just, put a lot of attention there. And sometimes information comes through beforehand, but I tend to want to really keep it at the time of the session, whether it's remote or in person. And so each person is very different. Everything's very individualized. So it may be that we're doing a little more talking and processing some of the trauma or patterns that we're working with. And then we integrate with a full session working with the nodule system and the gateways in the body and heart coherence and the central nervous system and releasing. So it's kind of a two-part session. So whatever we're talking about is how the session begins to navigate. And so most of the time, their Christ itself is working with me. Their guides are here. My guides are here. We're working together. Sometimes somebody who's crossed over comes through for them. That does happen on occasion. And so mostly we're working through Christ consciousness, the guides, angelic realms. They always come in.
Mm-hmm.
So that's pretty much how sessions occur. Unless it's done remotely, it's just a little bit different.
How do you know when the loved one comes through? Like, can you explain the process?
So sometimes they'll show up. I can feel someone coming through. It could be a message from somebody who's crossed over, or there have been some times where, like, for instance, someone's grandfather came in. I could feel their presence, but he was very quiet and didn't speak. And normally when that happens, we kind of, wave a red flag, like, okay, they're not responding. But sometimes family members, what I found, it's as if they're checking in, making sure everything's okay. And when I spoke to that person, she actually said, oh no, my grandfather would not, be totally understanding what we're doing. And he's very quiet. So that's totally him to stand in the background and not talk. So it's really interesting how that happens. And the first time it happened, when someone came through, they came up on my right side and announced themselves. And I know this person. I had never been, I'd never experienced someone coming through before. That was my first time. And when they came through and announced themselves, it really took me off guard. And I thought, oh wow, what do I do now? Am I supposed to tell this person? This is kind of, what do I don't know what to do. And so my guides were sharing with me. They're like, it's okay to share. And they came with a message. And when I shared it with the person, they knew exactly what it meant, and they were crying, and
Aw.
felt them there. And yeah, so that was my first experience. So I'm glad it was somebody that I knew, and I actually sensed that this was truth. So yeah, so that was interesting.
That's beautiful. I've heard that happens a lot with people who start doing Reiki and they're working on the body,
Mhm.
because it creates this portal, this vortex,
Mhm.
you're in the higher realms. So
Yeah,
this is where they're hanging out. And
yeah.
people who don't know how to speak to loved ones are like, I know someone's here. Their loved ones are here. And I'm like,
Mhm.
that's because you're creating this sacred space for them
Mhm.
to draw near. So
Mhm.
yeah, that's cool.
Yeah. How do they come through for you?
Usually when I'm doing a reading, I'm like, oh, you've got a grandfather here. I'll feel like a male presence on like one side, paternal, maternal. And then I'm an emotional like reader and healer. So I'll feel like a sense of joy or a sense of sadness and grief. And there's so many times that they're like, I'm so sorry. And, they're in tears and they just, it's validation and it's confirmation for them. But
Mhm.
it's cute because I'm teaching some of my students like the difference, you know, speaking to an angel and a spirit guide versus, Uncle Bob or, Aunt Joyce or Grandpa Joe, your relatives are, they still have that strong tie to the personality
Mhm.
and they can be very forthright. So, and they're very much like they will tell you like it is, like, nope, we don't want you dating him, he's no good, blah blah blah, versus like an angel or a spirit guide who's, very loving and compassionate, and they won't tell you, they won't, at least not from the work I do, they're not quick to tell you, yes, do A, or, take the path of B, or, they're more like, they'll give you options and
Mhm.
they'll tell you, they'll just kind of guide you that way, they'll just kind of guide you and give you a sense of, um just very much like a loving parent, like, here are your options, versus a loved one who's like, yeah, no. And they swear, they cuss too. I'm like, holy cow, you guys. And they're like, what? And I'm like, they just said the P word, you know? And they're like, yeah, that's my cousin. I'm like, okay, just know that. So yeah, it's interesting. Yeah.
Uh,
Mhm.
mm.
I'm curious, do you hear it as a voice? Do you hear the qualities of their voice? Do you see them? Or is it most you feel it, or how does it,
It's more like an impression, you
okay.
know, like I can feel their energy moving and they get sassy and they're just like, the energy is just like, talk, 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 talk. So yeah. And sometimes I'll get a visual. Sometimes I'll get a visual. It's hard for me to get names. They will only tell me names if they think it's important. And a lot of times they don't think it's important. Everybody's like, I want to know my angel's name and my spirit guide. And every so often the name comes through, but they just do not give names. It's more like a frequency. It's humans who want to put labels on it. And if you do get a name, sometimes it's the last incarnation you shared with that spirit guide, but that puts them in a little box and there's so much more than that. They want to be more than the past life that you guys shared together. So yeah, so I do get names every so often, but it's not common. Like if they want a name, I'm like, let me know ahead of time so I can meditate on it. Yeah. Anya, you said you get names?
Yeah, I get names. There's only been a few times where the name didn't come through. Um, I don't know. I guess I'm wondering if they just reveal what they want to reveal,
Mhm.
because sometimes I'll feel them come up, or I'll hear a name, and then a message. I've had some sit in the background. Um, I've had some that the family member that's here was not too happy that they were here. Um,
Oh,
there's boundary issues with that also. I've had a few instances with that. And so that's always interesting. And I have seen a few. In fact, one person, uh, actually the grandpa that I was just talking about, um, I had kind of a, a slight visual of him much later, not during the session. And I thought, oh, I wonder if that's them. And so I went to my person and said, do you have a photo? And she showed me a photo and it was him. So that was really interesting. Yeah, really interesting. But I've also had someone come through that this was when I first started also. I felt someone come in who felt very much like a prankster or a trickster, and not necessarily unbenevolent, but maybe nosy, a little nosy and kind of trickster energy. And I shared that with her. And I said, because I asked him when he showed up, I said, why are you here? He said, oh, I'm just checking in. And I said, oh, okay. And I shared some more of the information that came through, and she asked what his name was. So I asked his name. He gave me his name. And she goes, I don't know anybody by that name. And she said, but the person you're describing reminds me of one of the brothers of this family member. She had lots of brothers. And she was very, definitely crossed boundaries and was very nosy. And so she went into her family lineage. She went to the family tree to look, and that was the brother of that woman.
wow.
And so she, what he told me was that she sent him to go check on her. So it was very interesting.
Wow.
So yeah, so she has everybody else do her work for her, I guess. I don't know. It was very interesting. But so but yeah, so that was, because when you're walking into this, you're not sure. You're just delivering the information that's coming through. So when she said she went and checked the family tree, I'm like, whoa, this is happening. This is actually happening. This is really wild. So yeah.
So the people who crossed over didn't have boundaries, or the client's
No,
personality?
a couple of the people that came through in
Oh,
this part in their sessions
so do
that
you
had
think
crossed
that,
over,
so they haven't crossed over?
they did cross over.
Oh, they did.
Hmm.
No, I
Hmm.
mean like not like died, but I meant like beyond the earth plane. Like did they cross over to the light, or are they still hanging out here on the earth
Oh,
plane?
I do not know that.
Okay,
That I don't know. Yeah.
that's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, that I do not know. Yeah.
Because I get that sometimes they'll want to connect to someone, and I'm like, okay, what's their name? I can do it with their name, a lot of
Yeah.
times. And
Yeah.
sometimes if they haven't crossed over, I kind of see it as a blank space. Like
Hmm.
I there's like a shadow around them, kind of, but there's no talk, there's no, and sometimes there's like lots of like stuck energy. And I'm like, yeah, they haven't crossed over. Let's cross them over. So, and
Okay.
then once we do that, once the process is complete, I can feel the personality come up. And I'm like, okay, you're going into the light. Yay.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah.
So that process when you're doing it, is it different for everyone? Like everyone in your class, as they're learning how to do this, does everyone experience it differently?
Do
Or is
they?
that is that how you are able to assist? Is that your gift coming through? So is everyone's gifts a little bit different when they're
No,
helping people cross
it's,
over?
yeah, anyone can detect that, because it's funny. I'm reading up on some books and I'm like, this author said, she's like, sometimes, Uncle Bob doesn't want to come through. She can't get to him. And I'm like, that's because he hasn't crossed over. So I think the process is kind of the same when they can't get to an energy or it's stuck. So that's
Mhm.
kind of what I'm teaching them. And I'm like, okay, this is the process of how to cross them over.
Mhm.
You can do it different ways, but this is how
That's
I
what I
do
was
it.
wondering. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. So it's different
absolutely.
for each person and how
Hmm.
they're
Hmm.
assisting. Okay. That's
Yeah,
cool.
but
Yeah.
anybody can do it. Yeah.
Yeah. Hmm.
Yep.
That's fascinating.
I know, I love this stuff.
It's awesome, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah,
I love it.
yeah. Have you had anything like that with Catherine?
I don't often get people that have crossed over. I can if someone asks me to do that, but they've never just kind of popped in on their own. I mostly get um, the higher self, the guides, the ascended masters. So I often have those come in. But unless the person asks me about talking to a family member, I mean, I can do it. And then, yeah, it's just, it comes through in different ways. I get it. A lot of it comes through, I feel it's a different feeling or a different vibration. It's hard to describe, but it feel like you just feel different. Like I feel things open up. I feel a lot of like sometimes heat coming from my heart,
Mhm.
and the information that is coming in. Like I hear it as if it's my voice. So it's like my voice is talking to me inside my head, only it feels very different. So it doesn't feel like it's coming from me. It feels like it's coming from someone. There's a different quality to the sensation of it. And usually the information that's coming through can be like stated in a way that it's something I don't know where that would have come from. Like it would,
Yeah.
like it wouldn't be like the Gettysburg Address. Like I haven't thought of that since the other day. Like I haven't thought of that since fifth grade or whenever it was that we studied that. But for some reason that popped in. I'm like, why would I be thinking about the Gettysburg Address? Like it doesn't have anything to do with my life right now. Like nothing that I'm researching, or there would be no reason for me to have that pop in. So it's usually things that I wouldn't like seem kind of random or different that you wouldn't be thinking about, or the way that it's stated, like the words that are used
Mhm.
are different from what the way I might talk. And so that's how I kind of know I'm channeling. I feel different. It's like almost like going into a meditation, how that energy feels different. And then you start hearing or seeing things. So sometimes it's a visual, like it might be a flower or a color or a image of some sort that gets me to bring up a certain thing, like a bird or, you know, it could be anything that gets me to kind of bring up something that's meaningful to that person.
Do you
So
consider
that's,
yourself like clairaudient, or more one clair over the other, or just a hodgepodge?
I feel like I'm more clairaudient.
Yeah, that's what it sounded like when you were talking about sounds, like, your voice.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, but then probably what the one that's feeling like, is that sentience, clairsentience or
Clairsentient. Yeah.
sentience?
Yeah. And then you have to put
Maybe.
that into words, don't you?
Mm-hmm.
That's frustrating for me sometimes, because when I'm reading someone, I get like a whole beautiful sensation of a download, and I can feel the energy coming in for that person. And then they just kind of leave me, like, I'm like, okay, what do I do? What do I say? And it's up to me and my body and my senses to like interpret it, as best I can for the client. But I'm like, no, you guys need to speak words.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sometimes I'll ask if they can clarify. Can you give me something specific? Can you, can you, I need more information. Like
Yeah.
what does this mean? And then sometimes a image will pop in or some words
I
will
need to
pop
do
in
more
to
of
help.
that.
Yeah. So
Yes.
sometimes I just ask. And sometimes it's just a knowing. Like I've had times in my life where I forget what that's called. It's not
Cognizant.
claircognizance. Yeah.
Yeah.
Where like you just know something deep in the cell of your being that this is so, this is,
Mhm.
or this is what direction I need to go now. Like no doubt. It's just very, very like cellular, visceral kind of, yep. I don't know why I know this, but I know it.
That's a clear. That's a clear. Yeah, that's your intuition. Yes. You know, something you mentioned about the Gettysburg Address. When I was taking these courses, people were always like, well, how do I know it's me and not something else? How do I know where this thought is coming from? You know, and it's exactly how you describe it. You know, why would I Gettysburg Address? Where did it come from? You know, that's channeled information that's coming to you, you know, versus, you know, let's say you're thinking of an old boyfriend, you know, and you're opening up like a yearbook picture and you're like thinking about him for days. Well, that, you know, you opened up the book and that's kind of like where you can use a little bit discernment versus just a random thought, you know, of an old boyfriend or an old best friend from second grade. You know, if it's just this random, seemingly random thought, then they're probably thinking of you and you're picking up on that, you know.
Yeah. And sometimes it might like linger, like it just keeps holding your attention and you can't figure out why. Or it might come in multiple ways. Like if you're like,
Mhm.
maybe that's just a random thought. I don't know what that is. But then in a little bit, it comes in again in some way. Like maybe you see a picture of Abe Lincoln or in your mind, or maybe you see I don't know, something else. It just kind of keeps returning
Mhm.
and to you can't quite let go of it and you're just like I don't, and that's when you kind of can ask more about it, like, well, what am I supposed to do with this? Can you what am I supposed to get out of this? And then sometimes that'll expand it and give you more information that comes through.
Yeah.
Yeah, I notice all of that as well. So I seem to have a hodgepodge of it all. So it all comes through, including smell.
I've never had, well, okay, yes, I have a few times,
Yeah,
but it's rare. Yeah.
the
Or the
smell is
taste.
like,
People say they taste stuff sometimes too.
yeah, yeah. I think I've only had that happen a couple times. That's probably the one that I have the least is the taste part. But the smell, like I'm a few things that I've noticed is every once in a while I'll be working with someone and it smells like baby, you know, that brand new baby smell. And it's
Wow.
like, oh, what's going on? And then as things progress, like sometimes I receive the information, I have no idea why. It's just coming through. There's some more information wafting through, more information. And, you know, come to find out we're in the middle of like a rebirth of some sort, you know, and they
Mm.
literally smell like a baby, that, that beautiful baby
Wow.
smell. It's really cool. So I've had that happen with a few people. And just sense or specific visuals or um, I, I'm always surprised because it's so random and it always falls into place. Whatever's occurring, it always falls into place or lands just right. And they'll, you know, someone will say, "Oh my gosh, that just happened this morning," or "Oh, this has been on my mind for, you know, the last few weeks and I didn't know why," and then it shows up in a session. Or answers to some physical situations, you know, where they get to realize, okay, the physical that's been happening is related to this emotion. So all these things start to happen in sessions. It's so cool. It's just amazing.
Mm-hmm.
It's amazing.
It really is.
So when they have a session with you and it's a clearing or healing session, do you sit and talk with them at the beginning and tell them what's coming through? Okay, you do.
Yeah, I
Or
actually,
is it
I
just let's
ask,
move energy?
no, I always ask what's going on and what their, what awarenesses are coming up for them. You know, what were they thinking about before they came that they wanted to talk about, or something that's on their mind, or if there's any specifics, because that's usually where it leads us into,
Hmm.
you know, the awarenesses are where it leads us. Yeah. And then comes the rest of it. But a lot of talking, because especially now, these last few years, there's a lot coming up for everyone. There's so much coming up. And sometimes most people don't even know why, you know, or there's so much new happening in everyone's worlds, and so many changes in relationships and jobs. And so sometimes it's just a matter of talking so that we can get to some of the resistances or fear that's going on. That's primary.
That's the beautiful thing about healers, is that they
Yeah.
know how to listen.
Yeah.
People need that.
Yeah. Because, you know, most of the time, you know, I shouldn't say most, but a lot of people don't have anyone to talk to. They don't have anyone who understands what they might be experiencing. And so, which perpetuates the feeling alone. And so, yeah, so I always allow some space for that to come up first, always.
So, Catherine, like before your sessions, do you have someone like fill out a form, or do you guys just start talking, or do you want to wait before you start your session with people?
I don't have them fill out any forms or anything. We just kind of communicate briefly via email to just to schedule the session, and then you know I let them know if you like have specific questions that you want this to focus on, or you know, or I ask them to at least think about what they want to get out of the session. What is it, more of a healing transmission that they're looking for? Is it more of, I have questions that I want my guides to answer? Is, you know, what is it that's most important to them? And then so they can either, you know, send me those ahead of time, or just we can just do it in the moment. Lately it seems like it's been more in the moment because things are changing so fast, and so their questions may change,
Mm-hmm.
you know, by the time we get to the session. So it feels like lately it's been more, I haven't really even been getting things ahead of time very much, because it's really got to be in the moment
Mhm.
these days. So
It does. It really does.
it's kind of shifted a little bit.
Yeah.
And so then it's just, yeah, I think it still helps them to kind of prepare a little bit, kind of have an idea of what they're wanting, but then that can totally change. And then throughout the session too, I just give them opportunities to ask additional clarifying questions or whatever, so that we can expand upon something if there is something that needs to be, you know, go deeper into, or, you know, or maybe we just go into a healing,
I
an
love
energy
that part.
transmission. Yeah. So
That's my favorite part. I'm like, let's skip all the questions. Let's move energy. Come on, let's move energy and change the frequency. Yeah,
Mm,
yeah.
yeah.
yeah,
Do you ever
especially
have
now.
clients that try to test you, like when you're I have some clients that do that for me, and I'm like, no, let's not bring this frequency in, you know. But they're like, tell me what I'm thinking. I'm like, are we really doing this? Yeah,
I have
but
not
it's
had that.
fun. Yeah, it's fun.
No.
I haven't I haven't had anyone specifically do that. But I did have someone who works in the psychology field who was definitely examining, you know, to see if
Yeah,
if this was
I know you
legit,
can
right?
tell in the energy.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and after the first session, she was like, "Wow, okay." Like this was, it really opened things up for her, you know, to see herself in a different way and to see things in a very different way. And to this day, she's one of my most memorable people that I've ever worked with because she shifted so quickly.
Wow.
And it was kind of amazing, to be honest. It was really amazing because, you know, some people coming in, this is the first time for them. Some people, they've been doing this type of healing work with themselves and transformation for years. And her changes were, I mean, phenomenal. And she didn't quite realize it until we talked about it and until her significant other noticed something and said something to her. And oh, wow, this pain's disappeared. I have no pain. And oh, so I think it was just time. It was just time for her. But yeah, it was really, really a cool experience. Yeah, it was a beautiful, beautiful witnessing.
I know it makes the work that we do so worthwhile.
I love what I do.
I know.
I love what I do. I love humans. I love animals. I just love it. I love it. And to witness somebody's potential is I, I mean, that's just, there's nothing like it. There's nothing like it. It's incredible.
That's beautiful. Do you want to share any tips like on how you channel? Or how you do what you do, and or do you think we covered some of that? I know, Catherine.
I feel like we talked about that a little bit, or
Did we?
I did. Yeah. As far as
Okay.
like just prepping and meditation and um, just learning to pay attention to the subtle differences in the energy. Because sometimes they're subtle.
They are. They
and
are.
and so maybe this I know when I first started doing this, I thought it was going to be like
God's
really
voice.
like there, yeah, like, or if I could see something, it would be like somebody actually standing right in front of me, or like I would be able to see them like I see you, or that I would be able to hear somebody's voice talking to me, but it's not really like that. It's much more subtle than that. So
a
that's
good
kind
point.
of the, you know, you have to like
People need to hear that. They need to
change your
hear that.
expectations about how it's going to come through. And sometimes it's just a knowing or a feeling in your heart, or it can be, it can be different and come through in lots of different ways than just like what you see in the movies.
Yeah. Oh, let's get rid of the brainwashing and the
And that
Yeah.
and
stereotyping.
yeah, and that's just from our side of things, how things can be subtle, or even for the person we're connecting with, for them, it's what I hear is, wow, each session really is so different. Like, one session could be wow, like,
Yeah.
and then the next session can be so subtle and deep, or integrative, or it's everything has a different nuance depending on where we are. So it's always different.
Yeah. And the information that comes through, or the healing energy that comes through, you may not recognize, or it may not have meaning right away.
Mm-hmm.
You might be a
Yes.
few weeks or months or days or whatever down the road and be like, oh, that's what that is. Or
Yeah,
then you
it's
notice
true.
the change and you're like, oh,
Well, how many times have we
okay.
had like a channel from someone? I don't know about you guys, but for me, somebody did a channel, I recorded it. I went back and listened like 3 years later, and I'm like, oh my gosh, that's what that meant. Like, you hear it in a totally different way, So cool.
Yeah.
So cool.
Yeah.
That's funny. I wrote down 3 years ago, I just found this yesterday, a note that I channeled to myself,
Oh, wow.
and I think at the time I'm like, it sounds so much like me, I'm like, okay,
Yeah.
just do it positive. And then like 3 years later, I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe how accurate that was. Everything came true. And the guides are like, be patient, you're in transition, things are going to change. You have to go through a process and then it's going to happen. And boom, I'm like, holy cow, that almost scares me, but yeah, it's trusting, and it sounds so much like yourself,
It really
you know?
does.
Yeah. And
Well, but
it's
it
trust.
is really, it's
It
your higher
is.
self.
Yeah.
But it's you. So yeah, and we're all one. So
Yeah. Something you brought up that I wanted to like reinforce, that channeling and psychic work and intuition, it's not, what Hollywood makes it out to be. Because I get so many clients who are like, I can't see anything. I still can't see anything. I'm like, it's in your head. It's an impression. It's more of a feeling. It's an emotion. It's not a transparent ghost wearing clothes.
yes.
It's, but you very, very rarely does it happen. I'm not saying it doesn't happen. I'm just saying it's so rare, and I love those moments. Those moments you want every day. But for the most part, it's just on such a subtle level. You have to pay attention, which is why a lot of the people that are in our community have very centered, very grounded lives. They're not out there partying and drinking and causing chaos around them, because the energy and the guides come in very softly, very soothing and quiet, and they come through signs. The signs are a beautiful way that spirit speaks to you. So just pay attention and ask for signs. They're so happy to give it to you. Pennies and feathers and numbers and falling stars. So, and even
Mhm.
through people.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, we can be so create so much activity and make our lives so busy, or we're in our head so much, or we're in our devices, and it can't get through. If we're doing that all the time, it can't get through that. So you have to find a way to create a little space. And that's what the whole point of meditation really is to kind of clear that. But it doesn't have to be meditation. I mean, we've said this before, but it can be out walking in nature. Some people, we have a very good friend that really gets her downloads when she's out walking in nature. And they're amazing. And for the longest time, she didn't think she was channeling anything. But then it finally hit her like, oh, that's channeling. That's channeling. Oh, okay.
It's totally individualized.
Yeah. So you just have to figure out how it's coming through for you, and where you're able to receive it, because you have to be able to receive. And that's just a little tweak and adjusting your energy and raising your vibration so that you can meet it and be able to receive in some way.
Accept it, because so many of us don't want to accept it. We're programmed. No, that wasn't a sign. That was just a coincidence. Yeah. No, that was a sign. Yeah.
And yes, and I'd like to mention also what you just mentioned about being on our phones and being immersed in technology. That can definitely create an interference in being connected to our Christ itself. So it is very important to pay attention to that. So yes.
Yep. Turn off those devices as often as you can.
And you have to do without them forever. I love mine. But find those times where you can just be. Yeah.
My goal is to get back to a landline one day. We'll see. So,
well, thank you, ladies. Do you feel like this is a good place to stop?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you guys for watching.
Thank you all.
Good night.
Good night. Love you.